The conference notification arrived at 3:15 a.m. like a verdict delivered in darkness. And when Sharon Poole read it for the third time, she still couldn't quite believe that her 18-year-old daughter had just been selected as keynote speaker at the most prestigious business conference in the region. Sharon sat on the edge of their pull-out couch in the one-bedroom apartment that had been home for the past 4 years, watching Joy sleep peacefully just inches away, completely unaware that her life was about to collide with a past she'd never known existed. At 18, Joy possessed the kind of fierce brilliance that couldn't be inherited and the determination that came from watching your mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. The irony wasn't lost on Sharon that her daughter, this magnificent young woman who'd built a thriving consulting business while maintaining a perfect GPA, had been invited to speak at an event hosted by Olander Global, the same empire owned by the man who'd rejected them both before Joy drew her first breath, Donald Olander. Even thinking his name after 18 years felt like pressing on an old wound that had never quite healed. Sharon stood quietly and moved to their cramped kitchen, making coffee with the temperamental machine that required exactly the right touch to coax into working. Outside their single window, the city was beginning to stir. Delivery trucks rumbling through pre-dawn streets, early shift workers hurrying toward bus stops, the endless rhythm of people trying to build something meaningful from whatever circumstances life had dealt them. She'd been one of those people once, full of ambition and drive and the naive belief that love could survive anything. That was before she'd learned that some things couldn't survive corporate mentors who viewed family as dead weight, and rising executives too weak to fight for what mattered. Especially when you were 20 years old and pregnant with no resources, no support system, and no way to compete with men who controlled boardrooms and bank accounts. Mom! Joy's voice was soft but alert. She'd always been a light sleeper, probably from years of living in neighborhoods where being aware of your surroundings was basic survival. Everything okay? You're up even earlier than usual. Sharon turned to find her daughter sitting up, those distinctive gray-green eyes. His eyes, bright with the intelligence that had earned her a full academic scholarship despite every disadvantage the world had thrown at her. Her natural curls formed a halo in the early morning light, and Sharon felt her heart clench with fierce protectiveness. I got an email about the Summit Leaders Conference, Sharon said, holding up her phone like evidence. You've been selected as the keynote speaker. Joy's eyes went wide, then narrowed with the focused intensity she got when processing game-changing information. The Summit Leaders Conference. That's enormous, Mom. Those are the people who can write checks that change entire industries. I know, baby. This could be exactly the breakthrough you've been working toward. Joy scrambled off the couch, suddenly fully awake and pacing their small space with the restless energy that always preceded her biggest moments. When is it? What's the format? Do I need slides or just speaking points? What's the audience profile? Watching her daughter's excitement, Sharon felt her heart swell with pride and shatter with terror simultaneously. This was Joy's moment, the chance to stand on a stage where her brilliance could finally be recognized by people with the power to transform her future. But it was also the moment when their carefully constructed world would collide with the past Sharon had spent 18 years running from. The conference is in 2 weeks, Sharon said, scrolling through the email details with hands that trembled slightly. 20-minute keynote followed by a panel discussion and networking reception. Business formal attire at the Olander Global Conference Center. Olander Global? Joy repeated, already pulling out her laptop. That's one of the top corporations in the country. This is incredible. Sharon watched her daughter dive into research mode, completely oblivious to the significance of that name, and felt the walls closing in. She should tell Joy the truth right now. Should warn her that the stage she'd be commanding belonged to her father. Should prepare her for what was coming. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind 18 years of protective instincts and carefully maintained secrets. Instead, Sharon found herself staring at the email header that listed the conference host. Donald Olander, CEO, Olander Global. 18 years, 4 months, and 17 days since she'd last seen him. Not that she was counting. The memories came flooding back despite her best efforts to keep them buried. Donald at 24, brilliant and ambitious and completely convinced that his career trajectory couldn't survive the distraction of a wife and child. The way his mentor's words had changed everything. Executives who prioritize family over ambition never make it to the C-suite. The way he'd looked at her with regret but not love when he'd made his choice. A family would derail everything I'm building, he'd said, as if she and their unborn child were obstacles rather than human beings. And now, 18 years later, their daughter would walk onto his stage. Confident, accomplished, bearing his distinctive gray-green eyes and sharp intellect. Completely unaware that the man hosting the event had once deemed her existence incompatible with success. "Mom!" Joy's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sharon forced herself to smile, to push down the panic threatening to overwhelm her. "I'm fine, baby. Just thinking about everything you'll need to prepare." But she wasn't fine. In 2 weeks, 18 years of carefully maintained distance would shatter. In 2 weeks, Donald Olander would see the daughter he'd rejected commanding a stage in his own building. In 2 weeks, Sharon would have to watch the man who'd chosen ambition over love discover exactly what his choice had cost him. And she had absolutely no idea whether the collision would destroy them all over again, or finally force Donald to face the family he'd abandoned before it ever had a chance to begin. The countdown to reckoning had started, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. Chapter 1: The Impossible Invitation. The conference notification arrived at 3:15 a.m. like a verdict delivered in darkness. And when Sharon Poole read it for the third time, she still couldn't quite believe that her 18-year-old daughter had just been selected as keynote speaker at the most prestigious business conference in the region. Sharon sat on the edge of their pull-out couch in the one-bedroom apartment that had been home for the past 4 years, watching Joy sleep peacefully just inches away, completely unaware that her life was about to collide with a past she'd never known existed. At 18, Joy possessed the kind of fierce brilliance that couldn't be inherited and the determination that came from watching your mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. The irony wasn't lost on Sharon that her daughter, this magnificent young woman who'd built a thriving consulting business while maintaining a perfect GPA, had been invited to speak at an event hosted by Olander Global, the same empire owned by the man who'd rejected them both before Joy drew her first breath. Donald Olander. Even thinking his name after 18 years felt like pressing on an old wound that had never quite healed. Sharon stood quietly and moved to their cramped kitchen, making coffee with the temperamental machine that required exactly the right touch to coax into working. Outside their single window, the city was beginning to stir. Delivery trucks rumbling through pre-dawn streets, early shift workers hurrying toward bus stops, the endless rhythm of people trying to build something meaningful from whatever circumstances life had dealt them. She'd been one of those people once, full of ambition and drive and the naive belief that love could survive anything. That was before she'd learned that some things couldn't survive corporate mentors who viewed family as dead weight, and rising executives too weak to fight for what mattered. Mom! Joy's voice was soft but alert. She'd always been a light sleeper, probably from years of living in neighborhoods where being aware of your surroundings was basic survival. Everything okay? You're up even earlier than usual. Sharon turned to find her daughter sitting up, those distinctive gray-green eyes. His eyes, bright with the intelligence that had earned her a full academic scholarship despite every disadvantage the world had thrown at her. I got an email about the Summit Leaders Conference, Sharon said, holding up her phone. You've been selected as the keynote speaker. Joy's eyes went wide, then narrowed with focused intensity. The Summit Leaders Conference. That's enormous, Mom. Those are the people who can write checks that change entire industries. I know, baby. This could be exactly the breakthrough you've been working toward. Joy scrambled off the couch, suddenly fully awake and pacing their small space. When is it? What's the format? Do I need slides or just speaking points? Watching her daughter's excitement, Sharon felt her heart swell with pride and shatter with terror simultaneously. This was Joy's moment, but it was also the moment when their carefully constructed world would collide with the past Sharon had spent 18 years running from. 2 weeks, Sharon said, scrolling through the email. 20-minute keynote at the Olander Global Conference Center. She watched her daughter dive into research mode, completely oblivious to the significance of that name, and felt the walls closing in. Donald Olander, CEO, Olander Global. 18 years, 4 months, and 17 days since she'd last seen him. The memories came flooding back. Donald at 24, brilliant and ambitious. The way his mentor's words had changed everything. Executives who prioritize family over ambition never make it to the C-suite. A family would derail everything I'm building, he'd said, as if she and their unborn child were obstacles rather than human beings. Now their daughter would walk onto his stage, confident, accomplished, bearing his eyes and intellect, completely unaware the man hosting the event had once deemed her existence incompatible with success. Mom, you okay? Joy asked. You look strange. Sharon forced a smile. Just proud of you, baby. But she wasn't fine. In 2 weeks, 18 years of distance would shatter, and she had no idea whether the collision would destroy them, or finally force Donald to face what he'd abandoned. Chapter 2. The CEO's Hollow Empire. Donald Olander stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, 40 stories above a city that had watched him build an empire and felt absolutely nothing. At 42, he had everything his mentor had promised. The CEO title, the penthouse, the respect of every power player in the region, and it all felt like ash in his mouth. Mr. Olander. Marcus Chen's voice cut through his thoughts, his assistant's footsteps crisp against the marble floor. The final speaker list for the Summit Leaders Conference. I need your approval by noon. Donald accepted the leather portfolio without turning from the window, flipping it open with the mechanical efficiency that had characterized his life for 18 years. His eyes scanned the list of accomplished presenters until they stopped on a name that made his heart stutter.
Joje Pole.
Age 18. Founder and CEO, Pool Innovations.
Pole.
Sharon's maiden name. Marcus, Donald said, his voice carefully controlled. Pull everything we have on this presenter. Background, business records, everything. Within an hour, his desk was covered with printed reports that felt like accusation. Joy Poole, born April 23rd, exactly 37 weeks after he'd walked away from Sharon. 18 years old, self-made entrepreneur serving underrepresented communities. Full academic scholarship despite growing up in poverty. Then Marcus placed the photographs on his desk, and Donald's carefully constructed world imploded. Those were his eyes staring back at him from a young woman's face. His bone structure, his grandmother's distinctive jawline. The mathematical certainty was undeniable. This brilliant young woman was his daughter, raised by the woman he'd abandoned when she needed him most. Donald sank into his chair, the leather suddenly feeling like an electric chair. Sharon had been pregnant. All those years ago, when he'd chosen his career over their relationship, she'd been carrying his child. And he'd left her with nothing. The memories crashed over him like a tidal wave. Sharon at 20, brilliant and passionate and full of dreams about changing the world together. The way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth believing in, not just another ambitious executive climbing over anyone in his path. Then his mentor's voice, cold and certain. Executives who prioritize family over ambition stay middle management forever. You have to choose Donald. The corner office or domestic mediocrity. He'd chosen the corner office. Had watched Sharon's face crumble when he'd said the words that had haunted him ever since. I can't let a family derail what I'm building. She'd been pregnant, and he'd called their child a derailment. Sir, Marcus ventured carefully. Is everything all right? You look. Leave me, Donald said, his voice breaking on the words. Alone. He stared at the photographs of the daughter he'd never known existed. She had Sharon's grace, his intensity, and an accomplishment at 18 that put his own early career to shame. She'd built success from nothing while he'd inherited opportunity and mistaken it for merit. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Marks, his partner of 3 years. Another ambitious executive who viewed relationships as strategic alliances rather than human connections. She was everything Sharon hadn't been. Cold, calculating, perfectly suited for the hollow life he'd built. And absolutely wrong. Donald's hands trembled as he made his decision. In 2 weeks, he would see Sharon again. He would watch his daughter command a stage in his building, proving that love, even abandoned and betrayed, could create something extraordinary. He would watch from the shadows, and then he would find a way to earn what he didn't deserve. A chance to know the family he'd rejected before they'd even had the opportunity to exist. For 18 years, he'd told himself he'd made the right choice. Now, staring at his daughter's face, Donald finally understood the truth. He'd made the worst mistake of his life, and he had 2 weeks to figure out how to begin making it right. Chapter 3: Secrets and Sacrifices. True innovation comes from necessity, not privilege. Joy stood in the center of their tiny living room, laptop balanced on the arm of their second-hand couch, practicing her presentation with the intensity of someone who knew this moment could change everything. When you've spent your life watching your mother work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, you learn that the most revolutionary ideas don't come from boardrooms. They come from kitchen tables. Sharon sat cross-legged on the floor, pretending to take notes while her mind raced with calculations that had nothing to do with Joy's speech. 10 days until the conference. 10 days until Donald Olander saw the daughter he'd never known existed. 10 days to decide whether to shatter Joy's world before it happened naturally. Mom! Joy's voice pulled her back. You're not even listening. What did I just say about market penetration strategies? Sorry, baby. Run it again from the top. But Joy wasn't fooled. She set down her laptop and fixed Sharon with those gray-green eyes that were becoming harder to look at every day. You've been different since we got that invitation. Distracted, scared, almost. What's going on? Sharon felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. It's nothing. Just worried about... She gestured vaguely at the pile of bills on the kitchen counter. The usual. It's more than that. Joy sat beside her mother, voice gentle but persistent. Does this have something to do with Olander Global? With the conference? The opening was there, hanging in the air between them. Sharon could tell her the truth right now, could prepare her for what was coming. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind 18 years of protective instincts. I knew the CEO a long time ago, Sharon said carefully. Before you were born. We were close. Joy's eyes widened. How close? Close enough that seeing him again after all these years is complicated. What happened? Sharon chose her words like walking through a minefield. He chose his career over people who loved him, decided that ambition was more important than human connection. Joy's expression hardened with the fierce loyalty that had sustained them both through countless struggles. Then he's an idiot who doesn't deserve your energy. And I'm not going to let some ghost from your past ruin this opportunity for us. The word hit Sharon like a punch to the chest. Joy thought this was about Sharon's old heartbreak, not realizing she was talking about her own father. We should probably think about what you're wearing, Sharon said, desperate to change the subject. Business formal means we need to find you something appropriate. The next afternoon found them in their favorite consignment store, Sharon's hands shaking slightly as she flipped through racks of designer suits marked down to almost affordable. The price tags still made her stomach clench, but this was Joy's moment. They would figure out the rent somehow. Mom, look at this. Joy held up a forest green dress, elegant but understated. It's perfect, and it's actually in our budget. Sharon felt tears prick her eyes watching her daughter calculate costs with the automatic precision of someone who'd never known financial security. At 18, Joy shouldn't have to worry about whether a dress would mean choosing between electricity and groceries. Try it on, Sharon managed. In the cramped dressing room, Joy emerged looking like she'd been born to command boardrooms. The dress complemented her natural confidence, and Sharon felt her heart swell with pride and break with terror simultaneously. This conference could change everything for us, Joy said, studying her reflection. Real investors, real opportunities. Maybe you could finally quit that third job. Sharon pulled her daughter close, breathing in the coconut scent of her hair, and made her decision. She would protect this moment, would let Joy have her triumph before the truth destroyed everything. You're going to be magnificent, Sharon whispered, but silently, she added, and I have no idea how to protect you from what's coming. Chapter 4. The Investigation. Donald sat across from the private investigator in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Olander Global, far enough from the office that no one would recognize him, close enough that he could pretend this was just another business meeting. I need information on someone, Donald said, sliding a folder across the table. But I want to be clear, nothing illegal, nothing invasive. Just public records, business filings, anything that's legitimately accessible. The investigator, a woman named Sarah Chun who came highly recommended, nodded with professional understanding. Background check on a potential business associate? Something like that. 3 days later, the report landed on his desk like a judge's verdict, and Donald felt each page strip away another layer of the justifications he'd built over 18 years. Sharon Poole. She'd kept her maiden name or maybe returned to it. Current employment: waitress at Morrison's Diner, night custodian at Westfield Office Complex, weekend tutor through the adult education program. 3 jobs. The same 3-job exhaustion he remembered from when they'd been together, except now she was in her late 30s instead of 20, and she'd been doing it for nearly 2 decades. His hands trembled as he turned to her educational history. Enrolled in the MBA program at Carter Business School. The same program where they'd met, where they'd fallen in love studying late in the library, where she'd challenged his assumptions about privilege and power with a brilliance that had made him better. Status: withdrawn spring semester 18 years ago. Reason: not listed, but the timing was unmistakable. She'd been 3 months pregnant when he'd walked away, had dropped out of the program that was supposed to be her ticket out of poverty, had abandoned her own dreams to raise the child he'd called a derailment. Donald's vision blurred as he read the next section. Frequent address changes, 17 different apartments in 18 years. Always staying one step ahead of something, or maybe just chasing slightly better opportunities in neighborhoods where rent was almost affordable. The pattern painted a picture of constant struggle, of a mother doing everything possible to give her daughter stability while having none herself. Then he reached Joy's section, and his heart broke all over again. Full academic scholarship to Preston University. Founded Pool Innovations at 16, with $500 saved from tutoring classmates. Current annual revenue: over $200,000, serving clients that traditional consultants ignored. Testimonials described her as brilliant, compassionate, someone who actually understands what it means to build from nothing. Her client portfolio read like a mission statement. Single mothers starting home businesses, immigrant entrepreneurs navigating licensing requirements, community organizations trying to access grants they'd never known existed. She was using his strategic mind to do what Sharon had always dreamed of, leveling a playing field that had never been level. Donald pressed his palms against his eyes, but the numbers wouldn't go away. While he'd been building his empire, 40-story office buildings and quarterly earnings that made headlines, Sharon had been working night shifts to keep their daughter fed. While he'd been accepting awards for business innovation, Joy had been building something more meaningful from their kitchen table. Donald! Jennifer Marks appeared in his doorway, her expression calculating. You've been distracted all week. Is there something about this conference I should know? He looked at his partner. Polished, ambitious, emotionally unavailable, and saw everything he'd become, everything he'd chosen over love. It's nothing, he said, but it was everything. That night, alone in his penthouse, Donald made his decision. He would attend the conference, would watch his daughter present, and then he would do what he should have done 18 years ago, claim his family publicly, acknowledge his failure, and spend the rest of his life making it right. He didn't consider that some truths, delivered at the wrong moment, destroy more than they heal. Chapter 5: Under the Spotlight. Morning broke over 2 very different worlds. In their 1-bedroom apartment, Sharon helped Joy with the clasp of her forest green dress, hands trembling despite her best efforts to project calm. Across the city, Donald Olander stood before his bathroom mirror in a penthouse that cost more per month than Sharon made in a year. knotting his tie 3 times before getting it right. "You look perfect," Sharon whispered, stepping back to admire her daughter. Joy turned from the mirror, eyes bright with nervous energy. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That means you care. Use it." The Olander Global Conference Center rose from the corporate campus like a glass cathedral to ambition, all soaring architecture and reflecting pools that probably cost more to maintain than most people's salaries. Sharon felt her stomach clench as their rideshare pulled up to the entrance, where attendees in designer suits moved through the doors with the casual confidence of people who belonged. "We've got this," Joy said, squeezing her mother's hand. But Sharon saw the way her daughter's eyes widened, taking in the opulence. The momentary flicker of doubt before fierce determination took over. Inside, the main conference hall could have held their entire apartment building. Sharon found a seat in the middle section, close enough to see Joy clearly but far enough back to hopefully avoid notice. Around her, investors and executives discussed 7-figure deals like other people discussed grocery shopping. The morning sessions crawled by, impressive speakers presenting solid ideas that would have seemed revolutionary if Sharon's entire focus wasn't on the clock ticking toward Joy's keynote. In the VIP section, Donald sat rigid beside Jennifer Marks, his attention never wavering from the stage. "You're being strange," Jennifer murmured. "What's so fascinating about a conference you've hosted a dozen times?" Donald didn't answer, couldn't answer, because in 5 minutes, his daughter would take that stage, and his carefully controlled world would end. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Joy Pool, founder and CEO of Pool Innovations." Sharon's heart stopped as Joy walked onto the stage, poised and professional, those gray-green eyes scanning the audience with calm authority. "I built my business from my mother's kitchen table," Joy began, her voice carrying clearly through the perfect acoustics. "Not as a choice, but as a necessity. Because when you grow up watching your mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, you learn that the most revolutionary ideas don't come from boardrooms. They come from survival." Sharon felt tears streaming down her face as her daughter commanded the room. In the VIP section, Donald gripped his armrest so tightly his knuckles went white. Joy spoke about barriers facing entrepreneurs without connections or capital, about communities that traditional investors overlooked, about clients who'd built million-dollar businesses from food stamps and determination. She shared success stories with the statistical precision Donald would recognize as his own analytical mind, delivered with Sharon's passionate commitment to justice. "True innovation comes from necessity, not privilege," Joy concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. "The future of business isn't about maintaining existing power structures. It's about expanding those structures to include the brilliant minds we've been systematically excluding." The audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the hall. Sharon sobbed openly, pride overwhelming every other emotion. And in the VIP section, Donald Olander stared at his daughter with 18 years of suppressed love and regret threatening to tear him apart. "She's extraordinary," Jennifer said flatly, "though I question the wisdom of platforming someone so young." Donald barely heard her. His entire focus was on Joy as she accepted the standing ovation with gracious confidence, completely unaware that her father was watching her achieve everything he'd once deemed incompatible with his ambitions. As the applause died and attendees began moving toward the networking reception, Donald stood on legs that felt unsteady. In minutes, he would meet his daughter for the first time, and he had absolutely no idea what he was going to say. Chapter 6. The Public Reckoning. The networking reception hummed with opportunity as investors surrounded Joy, business cards appearing like offerings at an altar. Sharon hovered at the edge of the crowd, watching her daughter field questions with practiced grace, unaware that across the room, Donald Olander was moving toward them with the determination of a man who'd spent 18 years rehearsing this moment. Ms. Poole. His voice cut through the conversations, and the crowd parted automatically for the CEO. That was an extraordinary presentation. Joy turned, extending her hand with professional courtesy. Mr. Olander, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Your conference has an incredible reputation. The handshake lasted a second too long. Donald stared at his daughter's face. His eyes, his grandmother's jawline, Sharon's fierce intelligence, and felt his carefully prepared words evaporate. How old are you? The question came out more intense than he'd intended. Exactly, Joy's expression flickered with confusion.
I'm 18.
I'll be 19 in April. April 23rd? Yes, actually. How did you? Donald's vision blurred. April 23rd. Exactly 37 weeks after he'd walked away from Sharon. The mathematical certainty he'd been clinging to crystallized into devastating reality. Across the room, Sharon saw them talking and felt ice flood her veins. She pushed through the crowd, but it was like moving through quicksand. You're remarkable, Donald said, his voice breaking. You remind me of someone I loved once. He stopped, composure cracking completely. Someone I failed. Who? Joy asked, taking a step back from the intensity radiating off the stranger. Sharon reached them just as Donald's control shattered. Mr. Olander, I think. But Donald wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Joy with 18 years of suppressed emotion flooding his face, and Sharon knew with horrible certainty what was about to happen. I need to say something. Donald's voice carried across the reception hall, cutting through conversations. People turned, sensing drama. I need everyone to hear this. Don't, Sharon whispered, but it was too late. That brilliant young woman, Donald said, his voice shaking but clear, is my daughter. Joy Poole is my daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Camera phones appearing from everywhere. Reporters who'd been covering the conference pushing forward. Investors backing away from what had suddenly become a scandal instead of an opportunity. Joy's face went white, then red, shock and betrayal and humiliation warring across her features. What did you just say? I'm your father, Donald repeated, reaching for her.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry, but I couldn't let you walk away without knowing. How could you do this to her? Sharon's voice cut through the noise like a blade as she positioned herself between Donald and Joy. In front of all these people? You rejected us once, and now you're destroying her again. I was trying to. You were thinking about yourself. Sharon's fury was incandescent. Just like you always do. Joy stood frozen, cameras capturing every nuance of her devastation. Around them, the whispers had already started. Secret daughter. 18 years. Did she know? Is that why she was selected? No, Joy whispered, the word barely audible. Then louder, backing away from both of them. No, no, no. Jennifer Marks appeared at Donald's elbow, her expression coldly calculating. This is going to destroy us. The board will. But Joy was already running, pushing through the crowd toward the exit, Sharon chasing after her, while Donald stood paralyzed in the wreckage of his impulsive confession. The last thing he saw before security moved to contain the chaos was his daughter's face. Shocked, betrayed, humiliated, as everything she'd worked for dissolved into tabloid fodder. He'd finally claimed his family, and in doing so, he'd destroyed them all over again. Chapter 7: The Aftermath. Sharon found Joy in the parking garage, crumpled against a concrete pillar with her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that echoed off the walls. The forest green dress that had made her look so confident now seemed like a costume for a role that had been stripped away. "Baby!" Sharon dropped to her knees beside her daughter, pulling her close. "Everything I built is a lie now," Joy choked out between sobs. "They'll say I had help, that I used his connections, that I only got selected because..." She couldn't finish, couldn't voice the nightmare that had materialized in front of 500 witnesses. "None of that is true. You earned every... It doesn't matter what's true." Joy's voice cracked with anguish. "All anyone will remember is that I'm the CEO's secret daughter. Everything I've accomplished, every client I've served, every presentation I've given, it's all tainted now." Footsteps echoed through the garage, and they both looked up to see Donald approaching, his face ravaged with regret. "Please," he said, his voice hoarse, "please let me explain." Sharon rose to her feet like a lioness protecting her cub, fury radiating from every line of her body. "Explain? You rejected us once when I needed you most, and tonight you destroyed us again in the most public way possible. What could you possibly explain?" "I was young and stupid," Donald said desperately. "I've regretted my choice every day for 18 years. When I saw her on that stage, saw what you'd built together, I couldn't let her walk away without knowing." "Regret doesn't pay rent," Sharon cut him off, her voice shaking with rage. "Regret doesn't feed a child or work 3 jobs or stay up all night when your daughter has the flu and you can't afford a doctor. Regret is a luxury you get to feel while the rest of us survived." Joy stood on unsteady legs, her voice small but cutting. "Why now? Why did you have to announce it like that, in front of everyone?" Donald turned to his daughter, and Sharon saw the exact moment his heart broke completely. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if I didn't claim you immediately, you'd disappear the way your mother did. That I'd lose my chance to know you. You can't lose what you never had." Joy's words landed like physical blows. "You made your choice 18 years ago. You called me a derailment before I was even born. And tonight you made another choice. Your need to feel better about yourself mattered more than my moment, my achievement, my future. That's not... I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." Sharon moved beside Joy, mother and daughter united against the man who'd failed them both. "You've always prioritized what you needed over what we needed. Tonight was no different." Donald's face crumpled, tears streaming freely.
"I'm sorry."
"God, I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I'll make a statement. Tell everyone you had no idea, that I was the one who..." "You've done enough," Sharon said coldly. "Stay away from us." She guided Joy toward their rideshare, leaving Donald standing alone in the parking garage as his security team hovered at a respectful distance. Through the garage entrance, they could see media vans gathering like vultures, cameras ready to capture the fallout. As their car pulled away, Joy looked back once at the man who was her father, standing broken beneath fluorescent lights in a parking garage that probably cost more than their entire apartment building. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she whispered. Sharon pulled her daughter close, both of them crying now. "You're exactly who you've always been. He doesn't get to change that." But they both knew everything had already changed, and neither of them had any idea how to survive what came next. Chapter 8: The Price of Truth. 3 weeks after the conference, Sharon stood in their apartment staring at the eviction notice taped to their door, her hands full of termination letters from all 3 of her jobs. The headlines on her phone screen felt like they were burning into her retinas. CEO's secret daughter scandal. 18-year lie exposed. Nepotism questions plague rising star. Inside, Joy sat on the couch surrounded by printed emails, each one another client canceling their contract. Reputational concerns, they all said, as if the brilliant work she'd done for them had been retroactively invalidated by DNA. 5 more, Joy said without looking up, her voice flat with exhaustion. "That's 8 total. My business is dying, Mom." Sharon sank into the chair across from her daughter, fighting the urge to scream at the unfairness of it all. Yesterday, an investor meeting had devolved into an interrogation about Donald's hidden involvement in Joy's success. The investor had actually asked if her business records were fabricated, if her father had been bankrolling her operation while she played at being self-made. "We'll figure something out," Sharon said, but the words felt hollow. The rent was due in a week, and she had exactly $43 in her checking account. Her phone buzzed with another unknown number, the 17th reporter today trying to get an exclusive interview. Outside their apartment, news vans had been parked for 2 weeks, cameras trained on their building like they were criminal suspects instead of victims of someone else's impulsive confession. A delivery person knocked, carrying an elaborate flower arrangement that probably cost more than their monthly grocery budget. The card read, "Please let me help. Please let me make this right." Joy looked at the flowers with something approaching hatred. "How many is that this week?" "I stopped counting." Sharon had been throwing them away, along with the letters, the financial offers, the increasingly desperate messages from Donald begging for a chance to fix what he'd broken. "Ms. Poole," a voice called from outside. "Just a few questions about your relationship with Donald Olander." Sharon closed the blinds with shaking hands. They were prisoners in their own home, their lives dissected for entertainment by strangers who would forget about them the moment a juicier scandal emerged. Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse office, Donald stared at the resignation letter from Jennifer Marks. "I can't be associated with this circus," Jennifer had said that morning, her voice cold with calculation. "For optics, you need to distance yourself from them. Issue a statement saying you were mistaken, that you got caught up in emotion. My family's lawyers can." "Get out," Donald had said quietly. "Excuse me? Get out of my office. We're done, professionally and personally." Now he sat alone with Marcus's daily reports on Sharon and Joy's deteriorating situation. Every job loss, every canceled contract, every cruel social media post felt like a knife to his chest. He'd destroyed them trying to claim them, and they wouldn't let him help rebuild what he'd broken. The knock on Sharon's door 3 hours later wasn't another reporter. It was Maven Rodriguez, Sharon's best friend since college, carrying takeout and the expression of someone prepared for battle. "Move," Maven said, pushing past Sharon into the apartment. "We're having an intervention." "Maven, This isn't a good time. It's the perfect time. Maven set down the food and turned to face both women with hands on her hips. You two have been wallowing for 3 weeks while your lives fall apart because you're too proud to accept help you desperately need. We don't want his money, Joy said. It's not about want. It's about reality. Maven's voice was fierce with love. Pride won't pay your bills or rebuild your reputation. He owes you 18 years of child support plus interest. That's not charity, that's responsibility. It feels like giving in, Sharon said quietly. It feels like survival, Maven countered. And Joy, sweetheart, you need your father to publicly support your credibility, not hide while people question everything you've built. The only way to stop the nepotism accusations is for him to show everyone exactly how little involvement he actually had. The truth settled over them like a weight. As much as they wanted to refuse Donald's help on principle, Maven was right. Their pride was becoming their destruction. That night, Sharon and Joy sat across from each other at their kitchen table, having the conversation they'd been avoiding. If we do this, Joy said carefully, it has to be on our terms. Not his guilt, not his money, our conditions. Sharon looked at her daughter and saw the woman she'd raised. Strong enough to bend without breaking, wise enough to know when surrender was actually strategy. Then you make the call, Sharon said. Not me. You. Joy picked up her phone with trembling hands and pulled up the number Donald had been calling from for 3 weeks. It was time to face what they'd been running from. Not because they'd forgiven him, but because survival sometimes meant accepting help from the person who'd hurt you most. Chapter 9, Rebuilding on New Terms. 3 weeks after Donald's press conference, Joy's phone buzzed with his name for the 7th time that day. She'd been ignoring his calls, his texts, his carefully worded emails that always ended with, "Whenever you're ready." Sharon had stopped trying to manage the situation entirely, which was perhaps the most unsettling development of all. Joy sat in her half-empty salon. 2 stylists had quit during the scandal. 3 clients had canceled that morning, and finally answered. "I'm listening," she said, not bothering with hello. "Thank you." Donald's voice carried none of his usual corporate certainty. "I know I don't deserve." "Stop. If we're doing this, we're doing it my way. No script, no PR team, no making yourself feel better by apologizing again. If you want to be in my life, you show up and you shut up until I'm ready to talk." "Understood." A pause. Then, "Understood.
Café Mendoza.
Tomorrow at 2. Just you." The coffee shop was Joy's choice, neutral ground where neither money nor reputation mattered. She arrived first, claiming a corner table, watching Donald enter 15 minutes early and wait outside rather than presume. When she finally waved him in, he sat across from her like a man defusing a bomb. "I wrote down some terms," Joy said, sliding a handwritten list across the table.
Non negotiable.
Donald read silently. No public statements without approval. Financial support structured as owed child support, backdated and calculated by legal standards, not guilt. Joy's business remains completely independent. Weekly dinners, his attendance mandatory, his opinions optional. He must earn trust through consistent action over time. "I'll sign anything you want," he said. "I don't want your signature. I want you to actually do it." Sharon joined them halfway through, having been watching from her car, unable to stay away. The conversation that followed was stilted, careful, full of sentences that started and stopped. But nobody left. That felt like something. The first family dinner happened at Donald's request but Joy's selected restaurant, a modest Ethiopian place where nobody cared about CEOs or scandals. They sat around the shared platter, tearing injera, navigating silence. Donald asked careful questions about Joy's business. Sharon talked about her library job. Joy said almost nothing, just observed, testing whether he'd fill the quiet with excuses. He didn't. Week 2, Donald showed up with articles about Eritrean American entrepreneurs, having clearly spent hours researching. "I thought you might find these interesting," he said, then waited for permission before sharing them. Joy read one later that night, hating how much she appreciated the gesture. By week 4, something shifted. Donald issued a public statement, approved by Joy first, praising her business acumen and explicitly stating his support came from owing her what she'd built on her own. "My daughter's success is entirely her achievement. I'm simply grateful for the chance to know the remarkable woman she became without me." The statement went viral for its unusual candor. 2 days later, 3 canceled clients quietly rebooked. Sharon surprised everyone by accepting a position at the Olander Foundation, but only after Donald recused himself from hiring decisions and she'd been interviewed by the board. "I earned this," she told Joy firmly. "I checked." The house came next, a modest 3-bedroom in Joy's neighborhood, deed in both their names, no strings attached. "This isn't charity," Donald said when he handed over the paperwork. "This is 24 years of child support plus interest, calculated by state guidelines. I had lawyers verify the math. It's what I owed." Joy stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, and cried for the first time since the scandal broke. Not because of the house, but because he'd thought about what she needed to hear. Month 3 arrived with surprising normalcy. Weekly dinners had become actual conversations. Donald learned to listen more than talk, to offer connection instead of solutions. Sharon slowly released her decades-long grip on managing everything, letting Joy and Donald find their own rhythm. And Joy began asking questions about his childhood, her grandparents, whether she had his stubborn streak or Sharon's strategic mind. "Definitely your mother's mind," Donald said, earning Sharon's rare smile. "But my unfortunate habit of thinking I'm right." "Oh, I definitely got that from both of you," Joy said. The laughter that followed was genuine, unforced. Sharon reached for Joy's hand. Donald's eyes went suspiciously bright, and Joy realized the tightness in her chest had finally loosened. "Dad," she said, testing the word. "Can you pass the salt?" Donald's hand trembled as he reached for the shaker. Of course. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite. But it was family. Real, complicated, earned family. And that, Joy thought, was enough. Chapter 10. When Hearts Choose Each Other. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the house that had become home. Not because Donald bought it, but because they'd filled it with 6 months of careful love building. Sharon stood at the counter watching Joy review contracts for her expanded business, now serving clients in 3 cities, and felt something she'd forgotten existed. Contentment without anxiety attached. "Mom, the Seattle team wants to launch next month," Joy said, her confidence restored and sharpened by adversity survived. "We're actually doing this." "You're doing this," Sharon corrected gently. "Donald opened doors, but you walked through them on your merit." The doorbell interrupted them. Donald, arriving with grocery bags and his characteristic determination to cook despite catastrophic lack of skill. He'd stepped down as Olander Global's CEO 2 months prior, taking a chairman role that let him prioritize what he'd finally learned mattered. "I'm attempting chicken piccata," he announced. "I've watched 4 YouTube tutorials."
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Sharon caught Joy's amused glance. Their weekly dinners had evolved into something wonderfully ordinary. Donald's earnest culinary disasters, easy conversation, the comfortable silences of people who'd chosen to become family. Dinner was predictably chaotic, the chicken slightly rubbery, the sauce too lemony, but nobody cared. They were laughing about Donald's determined stirring technique when he suddenly grew quiet, reaching into his jacket pocket with trembling hands. "Sharon," he said, and the room shifted. 18 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life. I was a coward who chose ambition over love, who walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me." He pulled out a simple gold band, elegant without ostentation. "I'm not the same man. I can't undo the past, but I'm asking for our future. Will you marry me? Will you let me be the partner I should have been from the beginning?" Sharon's tears came swift and honest. "I need to know you won't disappear when things get difficult. I've spent 6 months proving I'm here for the long haul," Donald said steadily. "I'll spend the rest of my life continuing to prove it." "Yes," Sharon whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Joy's face showed joy tangled with protective concern until Donald turned to her. "Joy, I want to ask you something too." He pulled out legal documents. "I'd like to officially adopt you, give you the Olander name legally if you want it." "Can I hyphenate?" Joy asked, voice thick with emotion.
Joje pole Olander.
"Because I'm both her strength and your ambition." Donald's composure shattered. "That's perfect." They came together then, 3 people who'd been fractured by rejection learning what chosen family felt like. Through tears and laughter, Donald shared his final surprise. The Pool Olander Foundation for Single Parents Pursuing Education, $25 million in initial funding, Sharon and Joy as co-directors. The first scholarships would honor Maven, the friend whose tough love had pushed them toward this moment. Evening found them on the front porch swing, stars emerging as daylight faded. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, Joy said softly. Now I have everything I didn't know I was missing. We built something beautiful from rejection, Sharon added, her hand in Donald's. That's not failure, that's triumph. You both built something beautiful, Donald corrected. I'm just grateful you're letting me be part of it. They talked about Sharon's return to grad school, Joy's 10-city expansion plans, the small garden wedding they'd planned together, Donald's future in philanthropy, all the days ahead they'd spend choosing each other. As darkness deepened and stars multiplied overhead, Sharon leaned against Donald's shoulder while Joy rested her head on her mother's lap. 3 people who'd survived rejection and scandal and years of separation, now bound by something stronger than blood. Deliberate, hard-won, unconditional love. We're home, Joy whispered. All of us together, exactly where we belong. And we're never letting go of each other again, Donald promised, meaning every word.